From our perspective, looks at the lives and behaviors of millennials, Generation Z, and the changes that are happening in our 21st century and the innovators that are making it happen. We will explore trends, technology, music, fashion, social media, business, science, the arts, faith, and lifestyle. We would look at their interests, how are they changing our 21st century, and what is causing market disruptions, and what does that mean? From our perspective, it's not just another talk show. There will be roving reporters from the Caribbean, Europe, and North America. This will be a show of learning, exploring, questioning, listening, and creative ideas. So come join us on Comcast, Verizon, and online. In this episode, we are highlighting news outtakes from 2017 to 2021. We will be hearing the perspectives from two generations, a baby boomer and a Gen-Xer, who are giving insight from their perspective. "2017 Opioid Crisis. The public health official announced that drug overdose has become the leading cause of death for Americans under 50 years of age, with more than 2/3 coming from opioid painkillers, mass shootings. And the statistics actually is, in 2020, 24,000 died by suicide. That's guns. About 20,000 Americans have died from gun violence alone. 610 mass shootings in 2020. 610, and a mass shooting is defined as anything that is 4 or more. And in 2021, as of April 16, there has been 147 mass shootings. So that's why I'm having that more questions than answers. Really think about that. What is your take on that?
In a security field, we are trained to pretty much identify the possibilities of active shooters on the campus. We are also trained to be vigilant in sort of like detecting the possibility of somebody might be mentally disturbed or is having a bad day on the job, and we're supposed to identify and report so we can deter and even have some sort of recourse if that is being displayed. With the opioid scenario, I believe that the population of Americans who have fallen victim to that opioid crisis have been in the so-called majority, and they have taken a different approach to helping those individuals because of the fact that they see it as a health issue. Prior to that, when the crack crisis was pretty much dominant in the urban areas where people of African and people of the brownling of America was pretty much caught up in that epidemic, it was more criminalized. The care that was taken for the opioid crisis has been one where the concern was more help, give them treatment in hospitals, as opposed to lock them up and throw away the key. So there you go again. I think it's politically based, it's racially based. Sometimes it's even based on the economics of the individuals who are in crisis. Mm-hmm. Mass shootings is a crisis because of people who look at having guns as part of the Constitution, as part of their rights, but there's not enough, I would say, people doing this gun thing like NRA, as well as the rights of Americans to have guns. there are not enough checks and balances to know who is having the guns, what sort of like background checks is taking place. So it's an easy means of frustrating and getting rid of the problem with these mass shootings.
Mm.
Yeah, it's interesting with the gun situation. We are legal gun owners. We're licensed to carry gun owners. So I am not for removing guns at all. Like I believe that I believe in the right to carry. I don't believe that there's any reason for a person to have a weapon of mass destruction. I don't believe there's any reason for someone to own those AR-57s and those types of, I don't even know if that's the right number. It's an AR something, but weapons that can take out hundreds of people at a time. I don't think that there's any reason for those to be on the streets of the United States of America. So I do think that gun control in that aspect should be a definite. I believe that there should be a more secure background check. I mean, even the process that my husband went through to be licensed to carry. I mean, I was like, did they ask, like, what kind of questions did they ask you? Did they even ask about your competence? Like, nothing. I mean, I think it was very easy to obtain a license to carry. So I think that it should be more thought out as far as is who they're giving these weapons to, because I don't know how many more instances how many more times that this has to happen for it to be clear that there needs to be some kind of gun reform. I don't know how many more children have to be killed. I mean, it's out of control. And until there's something done, what's the saying? Nothing changes if nothing changes. So, I think that definitely needs to occur. As far as the opioid crisis, like that is, I mean, Bert kind of really said what I was thinking about that. I mean, it is unfortunate. But when you look at the population that mostly affects, you can kind of understand why now it's a crisis, right? Like, so it's a bit unfair. It is a bit unfair. It's unfortunate because, people, brown and black people have been struggling with drugs and addiction for years, and, have needed help. I mean, when you look at the recent death of DMX, right? Like, he was a person that could have been really helped by getting help, by reform. He was introduced to drugs at an early age by a predator. That's someone who needed help, not to be, not to have the book thrown at him, and it ended his life. So all of the policies that are being put in place for opioid abuse and addiction, I think it will help us all if we utilize them. But it's just unfortunate that it had to come to this for us to recognize that people need help.
Person of the Year, Time Magazine. We talked about the silence breakers. And as you know, or if you don't know, it was the Me Too movement, 2017. What is your feeling about that in reference to, this has been going on a long time, and someone says, it took, quote unquote, the celebrities or the individuals in that place to make it known, as compared to individuals who are in regular jobs, who have to deal with bosses, both men and females, that may be use that power that they have over them, that I can fire you or I can make your life a living hell, to take abuse. And abuse doesn't necessarily only has to be sexual. It could be, as you know, mental, degrading, how you speak down to someone, your subordinates, etc. How was the Me Too movement? How did you reflect on that?
As a female professional, I can say that I've been really blessed to not have experienced any of the, any situation or unethical type of behavior. My very first job out of college, it was actually, he was the past president of 100 Black Men of Atlanta. His name was Bernard Porcher, and I thank him every day. He literally took me under his wing, and he groomed me. He mentored me. He was the utmost professional, extremely kind, thoughtful. So my example to men in the workplace started with such a good baseline, and it remained that way. I mean, I've never been in a situation where I've had to endure some of the trials and tribulations that these ladies have. So I really can't speak to it. I mean, I could imagine that it's not a pleasant experience, but I really can't give much insight to it because it's just something that I have never experienced. I've always been in situations professionally with male colleagues who have just been pretty outstanding, to be honest with you. So, I don't know if I'm a rarity. It seems as if it, once the doors open with this, started coming out over and over, but it just has not been my experience professionally.
With me, with the Me Too movement, it hits a spot in my heart based on how we as men, and I want to believe women as well, who take advantage of men, which is not as open based on the way men look at that scenario. I believe that it's a good movement in the sense that they are bringing light to a tragedy that has happened to themselves, and it snowballs into more areas than a little bit. People need to work. People need to work in an environment where it's safe, where it's you can perform without having any threats over them, like firing or don't get promotion on the job. It's hard to really put the temperature on this. It's a movement that I believe have reached its time, and it is definitely putting ownership on behavior on the workplace. Being in the security field, that's part of our training as well. Sexual harassment.
Right.
I believe most companies have that in their book of ethics and their book of rules on the workplace, more so now than before. And it's just something that we are, as a society, is taking ownership of and trying to correct.
Right. Yeah. I can talk from my perspective, in the sense that, there's a slippery slope with this as well. And I've heard people talk about it in the sense that, if you smile, don't smile, women walking down the street and guys, do the cattle call, and, they're like, oh no, you shouldn't be doing that, et cetera, et cetera. Or even some women, as you said, in the workplace, it could be to the point of where, what images you have up on your walls. You go to the mechanics, that typical calendar with a girl like half naked across a car. And if women are working there, that could also be something what they can see that's being, demoralizing. So it's a lot of areas that men may not think are being what they may say, no, I didn't touch her, or I didn't say anything to her, or even if I said something to her, I didn't touch her. It's that clarity that I think is very important. That's where the conversation has to really come and sit down in a lot of the workplaces. I had an experience with a friend of mine with one of the jobs, and this is when I was a teenager, and she was not only sexually harassed, she was basically, was almost to the point of where it was almost a rape. And I was there when she came out of the person's office, and she, was just totally pale. And I was asking her what was wrong. And at the time, she didn't tell me, but a few days later, she told me what happened. And, and this is something where, she eventually left that job, but, it's something where I guess it depends on what age you are, because, you know, when you say how now I'm grown, I would have done things differently as compared to when you were a teenager. This is your first job. You know, what do you say? Do you stay quiet? You know, so all these things are factors, I think, that, you know, individuals, as I said, you know, even with individuals who are adults, these ladies sitting around this table and the Time magazine, and they knew about it. And a lot of people knew about Weinstein. They knew about it, but they didn't say anything because of that. You know, what will happen to my career, or what will happen to, you know, I have a mortgage to pay, or, you know, if I say something, what is the consequences to me? So it's really a deep thing that we have to think about, not only just for a Me Too movement, but I think also for ourselves as to, you know, how bold are we to come out and really express ourselves.
And I came from a home environment where I had a voice. What I said mattered. People listened to me. And so I would have never felt as if I couldn't have said something. If something like that happened, I've always been very empowered from a child to speak my mind and to speak your truth and what happened to you. Like let's talk about it. It's always been a very open environment. So I understand how it could be difficult for these ladies because, you know, some of them were in very high profile situations, but just me personally, I just can't imagine something like that happening to me and me not having the courage or the voice to say something just because of the sheer nature of who I am and how I was raised. Like I would absolutely say something. I mean, you know, so.
And maybe that's where we have to empower our young girls to be that, you know, and that's part of what, you know, the whole, you know, the program that which is part of From Our Perspective to 21st Century Innovators, is empowering not only just young girls, but our young men to be,
absolutely,
you know, and so that's something that, you know, as you said, more questions than answers. That's part of what we should be answering, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember talking, I mean, I've been talking to my son about good touch, bad touch before he could even talk. Like that was one of the very first conversations and frequent conversations that we would have about what it is, what it feels like, if it's awkward, like about speaking up, like you say something. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's mommy's friend. I don't care if it's uncle, auntie. I don't care. We speak up. We say something. So I think it is an important thing to you have to have these conversations from small. And I think that when you do that, you do empower people, and when their voice matters, I think that they have more courage to speak up and to say something, as opposed to suffering in silence for years and years and years. Like I just couldn't imagine doing that.
Yeah.
Oh God, like I mean, the George Floyd case, like that, it's almost exhausting, you know, because it's exhausting to whereas, and when I say exhausting, I mean, I feel like every other day, just what was it, today or yesterday, the 15-year-old girl who was gunned down today by the police officer in Ohio. Like I just feel like when will it end? And you know, we talked about this actually when this happened. We were working virtually, and I spoke about this to my colleagues, who I am a vast minority. I'm probably the only minority on my team, and you know, of course, they're very empathetic and sympathetic, and you know, really trying to understand how I felt. But you know, the conversations that I have with my son, and I'm not talking about occasionally, I'm talking about every single day, about you know, how do you behave if you're pulled over? What happens? I mean, he called me not too long ago, and he was pulled over, and they pulled him over for, I mean, it was something silly like a tail light out. I was terrified. I mean, he had me on FaceTime. I see the blue lights in the background. I mean, my heart is racing. I'm on speakerphone, and the police officer, I'm like, Chaz, please keep your hands on the steering wheel. No sudden movements. And I hear the police officer saying, get out the car, get out the car. I mean, it was horrific. And I'm like, Chaz, slowly, if the phone falls, let it fall. I mean, it is those kind of conversations that my colleagues don't have to have with their sons. You know, and finally the cop, after they like realized, you know, everything was fine, he was like, Mom, please calm down. I was like, I can't calm down. I was like, I am terrified for my son's life right now. Until he's gone in his car and away from you guys, I will not be calm. So those are conversations that we have to have. That is exhausting. I mean, just the worry, it's something that unless you are a mother of and now it used to be a Black boy, but it's a Black child, period. You know, you will never understand the fear and the way that we pray. I pray like I've never prayed before for my son every single day. Like it is a type of fear and exhaustion that I don't think anyone can ever imagine. So is this verdict good? It's great. I think justice has been served in this case, but when will it end? You know, when will it end? I don't know.
That's a good point. Let's stick on this George Floyd verdict for a minute. Okay, you express eloquently based on being a mother to a child, but the father that I am to my son have similar trepidations as well. I'll give you a good example. A friend of mine who works in finance came into town to give a presentation, and he invited me for dinner. So when I got in front of Madison Square Garden, they were doing some construction. Well, this is Madison Square Garden. This is pre-COVID. COVID wasn't even a thought. This happened a couple of years ago. So my point is, that's a busy, busy area. This is Macy's, this is Madison Square Garden. You do the math. It's around 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening. It wasn't that dark, but it's getting to be dusk. So they were doing some construction outside the garden. So I decided to turn my back to the sidewalk and take my wallet out. I didn't want to take the money out in front of people walking by. All of a sudden, I looked to my left and there was a police officer sneaking up to see what I was doing. So I asked him, how can I help him? So he said, what's going on? So I said to him, this is my son and I'm giving him some money. You know how he replied to me? He said, well, you know, this is a drug drop spot. This is Madison Square Garden. This is a drug drop spot. So when he said that, I repeated what I said originally. I said, this is my son, and I'm giving him some money. Then he looked at me and said, why are you being so aggressive? And when he said that, my whole instinct was to say nothing else and walk away from this gentleman. Young Caucasian police officer. He had a female partner in uniform, and she was facing, her back was to us, facing the crowd as they go by on the sidewalk. And when I walked on him, he didn't call me back, he didn't try to stop me. My whole understanding of that situation was to do exactly what I did, because he was trying to bait me into conversation that wasn't needed. And he was bringing things into the conversation that was so erroneous to me and him engaging in conversation. So that kind of behavior that the police officers exhibit is scary as well. They want to get you to be a pretty much an aggressive type of person when they question you like that. So that's one of the things I have to be mindful of as a dad and as a person, even as myself, when I'm dealing with the police by myself, how to deflect and diffuse the attacks on your intelligence.
Yeah, it is. That's a great point. And what's so sad, and I don't know if it's sad or if it's just our truth, you know, because my son grew up in a very sheltered environment. When we lived, he grew up in the suburbs. He's never really experienced racism. He's never really experienced, you know, anything like that. So does he think it's real? I think he sees it on TV, but, you know, I have to continually remind him that, you know, there are people out here that will just want to hurt you sometimes for no reason. Like they're bad, evil, racist people just because of the color of your skin. But because he's never experienced it, I wonder how serious he takes it. I mean, I tell him little things like all the time. We have this conversation about the hood. Take the hood off of your head. Take the hood off of your head. When you're walking into a building, take the hood off of your head. Like, and he's like, why, Mom? I'm like, because everyone is not mom and dad. Just making them woke. And when you look at that one pyramid that says woke, you know, and him going to an HBCU, I think has definitely helped, because they educate them and make sure that they're woke and they understand how to thrive, not only survive, but thrive in this America that we live in. So I appreciate that, but it is just, it's exhausting. It really is. It's exhausting. It's overwhelming. And it's draining. It really is. It's draining. Sometimes I've just eliminated social media at some points because it's just, the images are just too disturbing and emotionally, like, you know, it's tough.
The compounding of all these factors, COVID, George Floyd, police brutality, the stresses of unemployment, inequity, both in the corporate world, as well as, this is globally, because we saw not only United States marching for BLMs, but we saw when that happened with George Floyd, it was all over the world. And so we recognize that there is definitely an inequity based on race, based on gender, based on the cultures of individuals, and also just based on ethnic background. We're talking about Myanmar, we're looking at Hong Kong with all the marches that are happening there because of the transition now to China. It's just a constant movement, and instead there's nothing new under the sun, but sometimes it feels like more questions than answers. But I believe that we are speaking what so many people have on their hearts and want to say.
Well, I think that there's a purpose in all this pain. With everything that's on here, I think it's gotten conversations started, conversations in large organizations that would have never happened had these instances not happened. So, I definitely think that there's a purpose to the pain. I mean, even my organization has done an amazing job of inclusion and diversity and having conversations and doing things, actually acting to try and make things better, whether it's educating, because a lot of it is just lack of education about being insensitive about, we've gone through so much training and inclusion and diversity and just helping people understand and just having the conversation. So had this never happened, we would have never had a platform for anyone and for any of us to learn and grow and understand one another. And at the end of the day, we have to live on this earth together, right? We have to learn how to coexist together. So I think all of these things that are happening, the riots, the Black Lives Matter, the George Floyd's, I think it's just created a platform for us to learn and grow. And if we do that well, then it would be kind of purpose for this pain that we've suffered.
When the law has been passed that police officers now could be prosecuted for overzealous arrests for violating your civic rights, as well as the police partners, if they intervene to stop the police from being that egregious to a citizen, they would not be prosecuted, because in the past they could be prosecuted for stopping a police officer. They themselves being police officers, or even intervening on an arrest.
Senior police.
Yes, and then further on with the COVID-19, the chatter on internet and the chatter on some of the friends I have, how the vaccine is something that should not be taken, and it's just an overwhelming debate as to the validity of the vaccine. I believe the vaccine is important. That's me, after consulting with other experts. That is another bone of contention based on who's taking it, why we have to take it and still have to wear the mask and everything else. So yes, there's a lot of conversation going on with the woke generation, the cancer culture generation, vaccine, as well as policing in America. But the conversation is definitely something that will bring, to me, closure eventually as to how to go forward from 2021 and beyond.